Hello and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be working on Dice Roller, which we built a dice roller that simulates the results of rolling some die. And so they can roll 1 through 12, and then once you roll, so if you roll like 10, it'll be like this, and you have 3 die per roll, 1 through 12. That's what we're building. And then I do have some stuff, so I did make this before making the video because I didn't want this to go too long, show all my struggles and stuff, but essentially I have the CSS saved from when I originally did this, and then I have some other stuff saved that I'll go over as we need it. But I guess the first thing we want to focus on is like building this part, right? So what we want is a label, a submit button, a number of die, and then we want to put into state. So once they hit like a number, we can take whatever they put in, and in state we can have a number of die equal to what they put in, and then we can map through these die and show some stuff. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is we're essentially going to take some stuff and save it. So we'll say rolls, set rolls, and so initially there will be no die, so we'll just say like this. And in this div we'll have a form. And this should be familiar from like other videos, it's all the same stuff. And yeah, you typically, like, you can make this outside of a form, but typically anything you submit should be in a form. So in this form, we can have a label. And then this can be for the dice. And we can call this number of dice. Okay. And then we want to have a div for the submit button and then the input group. So we can have a button, and this could be a submit or roll or whatever. Roll. And I already have some styles here, so this is applied to the button. And in this div, we'll have an input, and this input will be type text. We want to have a min, that's 1. A max, that's 12. And then ID. Dice and name dice, so we can extract that once we submit the form. All right. So there we go. Okay. And like I said, I do have some styles. So this container guy can go in the outside element. This basically just is going to center everything for us. So container, and then this dice form, which would go on the form. Same kind of thing, we'll just give form some basic stuff. Yeah, so literally just a margin. And then the input group is going to be this, which will just spread stuff apart, so pretty simple. So that will go here. And let's see if we have anything else. We have the input. That's already actually done. We have the button and the button hover, and that's it. Okay. So essentially this is it. Now we need to actually, once they make a roll, we need to actually save this somewhere, right? So we can put a submit handler here, so we can go on submit, and typical stuff, handle submit. And we can write a handle submit function up here. So essentially the handle submit function is gonna take an event, like all submits do. Then we want to do event prevent default, because we don't want the page to reload. And then we need to actually get this field. So we can say, and I've done this in a couple other videos, we essentially make a new form data from the event target. Then we get the entries from that. I'll drag from entries, data. And so this is basically like a dictionary where the key is going to be every name of our field. So we have this name dice, and then the value will be whatever they put in. So then we can say set rolls, should be set rolls, to, so this input is going to be a string, so we need to first convert it into a number. So we can say array, we go parse int, convert it into a number, so entries, so the key will be dice, because this is what we called it, dice. So basically an array of this length, and then every single one of those needs to be a number. So we'll fill it with null, and then we'll map it to something that takes no element. We don't really care about the element. And how do we get a random number? We can just get a random number, multiply by 6, and then floor it, essentially. So math random gives you 0 to 0.99 multiplied by 6, and flooring it will give us a random number from 0 to 5, and then we add 1 to get 1 to 6. So we can go math floor, math random times 6. And once we floor it, then we can add 1. All right. And then, did I misspell it? Okay. And then we can see if that works so far. So we can go console log rolls here. Okay. So if we put in like 10, we have 10 random numbers, and here they are. Okay. So now that we have these numbers, let's talk about how we're going to make these die and why I have this. So there's kind of two ways you could do it. One, you can imagine each one of these die is like, you can make all these relative, and then you can give an absolute position of each dot on the die. So essentially this will be like the center, this will be top left, bottom right, and so on. And I think this is how they do it in the solution here, actually. So like top left, top right, and so on. So there's 7 positions, right? These 6, and then the center. And then you can make a dot, and you can put it on the die. So like die 1 will have a dot in the center, where you just say like make the die absolute, and make the die relative, and then make the dot absolute in the center, and so on. So essentially, and then you could just say like what die do I have, and you can give it all a bunch of different class names. So this can be class name like top left dot, center dot, so on, so on, so on. And then you can just give each die a bunch of class names essentially. And then, yeah, so actually, so what you would do is for each die, you would have an array of class names. So you can have like, die 1 will have like top left, center, whatever. And then for the die you want to show, you just map the class names to divs, and then each one of these divs will just be a dot. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is we can just make a grid. So we can make a 3x3 grid on a die, because if you think about it, like we can have 3 columns. So this will be like column 1, column 2 will be the center, and then the right, and 3 rows. So top row, middle row, and so on. And then we can just say like where's the location of every dot on the die. So like here, this would be 1, 1. This would be 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2. And then this is row 0, column 0, row 1, column 0, and so on. So that's kind of how I did it here. So on die 1, we'll just have row 2, column 2. So actually, in a grid, I guess it's not 0 indexed, it's 1 indexed. So this will be like row 1, row 2, or 3. And then 2 will be row 1, column 3, which is, let's see, here. Yeah. Actually, no, row 1, column 3 will be over here. Maybe I did this wrong. We'll see how this looks like. But essentially, you give it the row and the column for all of these, and then we can just map through all of these to have the die. So yeah, maybe I actually did have it this way instead. We'll double check there. But essentially, you make a grid, and then you give each of your items the place in the grid, and then you just map through these, and you say like, okay, let's just make a div for each of these, and let's give it style the row and the column we provided. So the die will be the grid, and then the dot will be like where it is on the grid. So that's kind of the solution I'm going with. So let's try that. And then, yeah, if these are backwards, we'll modify this a little. Just didn't want to do it from scratch. But that's basically how it works. So you see, like, this has 1, 1, 1, 3, and whatever. So we'll see how it looks like. And like I said, if we need to modify, we'll modify it. So how do we actually display this guy? Well, what we need to do is, like I said, we need to map through the roles first. And then for each role, we're going to map through these guys. Like each one of these will be a div, and then we're going to place those on the die. So as I said, I have a bunch of like styling for these things. So let's take a look what we have. So we have the dice grid. That'll be the overall grid. So that's going to be like the outside part. So let's do that first. So that's going to be outside of the form. And we only want to display this grid if we have more than, like, we need to have some roles. So we can go roles length. And if this is greater than 0, then, and also, by the way, if you just do roles length, this will actually give you a 0. This will actually display 0, I think. So if I just do like this and a div of like high, I think this gives you a problem. So that's why you have to have greater than 0. So you can see, like, I don't actually want to display 0. So yeah, I think it's because I forgot the exact rule or the exact reason. I have to look that up, but essentially this is like a common problem. I think it might be because 0 is truthy. No, actually, I don't think that's it. Yeah, I'll have to look that up. But this is like a common React pitfall. Essentially, when you have something in an and, you can't have a 0. Or if you don't want to have a 0, then you want to have a Boolean. Could also do this, I think. Let's try it. So if we do this, yeah, you could do this as well. This alternative basically converts into a Boolean. Okay. So, yeah, then the next thing is we actually want to have this stuff, right? So this is, in this div, we're going to have the dice grid. So we don't actually want to have this high. So we want to have class name, dice grid. Okay. And so in this div, then we're going to need to map through the roles. So we're going to need to say roles map. And then we basically want to take the role in the index, standard stuff here. And then, so how should we map through the role? Well, like I said, for each role, we're going to want to have a die, first of all, right? So for each role, we're going to want to have this outside die guy. So let's have this outside div. So we can go div, and then we need to give it a key. So the key can be the index in this case, because the roles aren't unique. Or index. And then we can give it a class name of die. So class name, or I call that like dice. Let's see. Dice. Yeah, so this is the grid, right? This is the 3x3 grid where we're going to be putting our dots on. So class name dice. All right, let's have a close div. Okay, so we just have like some stuff. Misspelled again? Yeah. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so here we have our dice. Now for each of these dice, we want to map through this and put it in the grid. So essentially, this is a 3x3 grid. So we can say like, for each of these things, we want to put a dot in this position. So that's the next thing we have to do. So basically we can say, what's this guy called? Dice face dot positions. And we want to map through this. And what's the index? So we want to figure out like, what did we actually roll? So whatever we rolled is what we're mapping. And so we can go position I, and here we want to have a div with a key. So that can just be the index again. Okay. Yeah, and this is going to be all unique, and this is going to like refresh every time. We're not moving these things around. Like every roll, this whole thing is going to get remade, so that's fine. Okay, so we have a div with a key. Let's have a close index or a close div. Then I guess what else do we need? So we need the class name dot to actually show the dot. And then we need to give it the style. We need to actually place it, right? So if we just do this, let's see what happens. Yeah, so these dots aren't placed correctly. This just places. So if you do this, this just places things in the grid like 1 by 1 by 1. But we actually want to specify where exactly do we want to place it. And a grid lets you do that. You don't have to put things in a row. You could say like the first dot actually goes down here, and so on and so on. So we can actually just give it a style. And then the style can be, we can specify the row and the column. So grid row equals, let's see, position row. And grid column, position column. Now, let's give it a go. Okay, so now things are in the right place. So actually this 2, yeah, so this 2 is backwards, so let's actually modify this to make it in the right thing. Okay, so the 1 is fine. The 2 needs to be in row 1, column 1. And then row 3, column 3. And then the 3 needs to be the same as the 2. And also in 2, 2. So we'll go bang. And this. Okay, so far so good. The 4 looks good. The 5 looks good. And the 6 looks good. But we don't have a 5. But hopefully this makes sense now. We're basically going through all the dots and we're saying like we want to control where the dot is, and we can make it wherever. So like for this 1, if we don't want it to be here, if we want it to be in like 3, 3, it'll go there. And you could see like how convenient this is. Instead of doing the absolute and relative and all that stuff, we just made a grid. We're like, realize this thing is actually a grid. And then it's super convenient. You don't have to figure out like, oh, I need it to be this amount this way, that amount that way. And this is reusable. So you can use this and you can have a bunch of die. And we don't need to have like a billion class names for everything. We just essentially make a grid. So this is super convenient in my opinion. Okay, so let's continue here, I guess. Yeah, so in this div, we don't need anything. I think it can actually be a self-closing div. Okay. And did I miss anything? Let's see. So we have the dice, we have the dot. And look, there's not that much CSS either. Like, we don't need a class name for every single one of these locations. Like, we're basically giving these locations, and we can modify it later. Like, if we want the dice to look like something else, we can easily do that in here. So I think this is actually everything. Let's see what the 5 looks like and stuff. Yes, this is good. And yeah, you can see how all of these things are also spread out, the separation of concerns in the CSS. Like, if we want our dots to be blue, easy. If we want our dice to be something else, also easy. So yeah, that's the main thing here, is try to have separation of concerns, try to not have a bunch of duplicated code, and then that way it's really easy to modify whatever you want. And then typically you probably wouldn't have this, maybe you wouldn't have this in the app, maybe you'd have it somewhere else. And you can easily modify whatever you want. If you want to modify the color, the size of the dots, the size of whatever you want, it's all going to be super convenient. Yeah. So if we compare this to the actual solution, let's see how we did. Okay, so it looks a bit different, but yeah. So hopefully most of these things make sense. Wait. Oh, I guess. Oh, actually, this is this way and this is this way. Okay, well, whatever. You can easily, now you understand like how you can easily change it. So I guess I was comparing to this guy instead of that guy. That's why it's the other way. Yeah, I actually don't know what it is on the die, if it's this way or that way or whatever. But hopefully all this makes sense. So using a grid here is going to be best. But like I said, you can try to code this in another way using absolute and relative positioning. And then you could, basically, the change here to also make it reusable was instead of these, you can give it class names. So your thing would be like class name like top left, you know, middle, or, you know, whatever. And then each of these class names could be a style. So in these class names, you could say like, oh, top left means I need to have it be up here in an absolute position from my dice. And then you would make your dice relative. You would make this absolute. And then you would say like left, you know, 0, right 0, or whatever it is. Or left 0, top 0, because you want it to be in the top left. Or like left 50, top 50, or whatever it is. So that would be the alternate version, but I think I like this one a lot better just because, like I said, this seems a lot cleaner to me. So in general, I would say try to avoid using absolute and relative positioning when possible because it's going to be messier, and try to use like grid or flexbox or any of that kind of stuff when possible because it's, like I said, it's just going to be a lot cleaner. We don't have to figure out where relative to what we are. And yeah. Yeah, and I think that's going to wrap it up. So hopefully this was helpful. If it was, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.